Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory, and this is The View from Out Here. I want to talk about national elections today, or more specifically, what I call election derangement syndrome, where so many people tend to get a little cattywampus around election time. I have always voted, and I actually read the voter's pamphlet before marking my ballot. I live in Oregon, and we vote by mail, which, as far as I can tell from here, is the most secure method of voting that we have. Of course, you wouldn't know that if you spent much time on social media. The Republican Party is dead set against voting by mail, probably because it is so hard to hack. They are dedicated to dismantling the institution of voting because more voters than not will tend to vote for somebody else if they don't. Voter suppression has now become a presidential campaign tactic for Republicans. I guess I should start at the beginning. Back in the day, way back in the day, men didn't run for president. They were drafted to serve by their neighbors, other wealthy white landowners, and they were promoted as visionaries for a struggling new nation. Presidential candidates simply emerged as natural leaders based mostly on their success in business, along with the demonstration of their love and concern for the greater good of the whole. They didn't campaign. Their neighbors lifted them up and campaigned for them. That's where nominations come from. Actually, asking to be president or volunteering why you might be a good choice was about as polite as taking the last slice of pizza. Everyone wants it, but it's too selfish an act to actually step forward on your own to grab it without being coaxed. Of course, all that has changed. Visionary leaders no longer naturally emerge. They plan and calculate an entire lifetime to set themselves up for the possibility of one day being able to grab for the brass ring. They are groomed and created by teams of politically minded folks, a political party, the college they attended, or their parents. Nowadays, presidential candidates have a deeply rooted thirst and an agenda that meets the approval of the generationally wealthy and powerful. I want to be clear about this one thing. There is a lot of money tied up in the office of the presidency. Multinational corporations are not going to let just anyone become president. They have way too much money invested in this thing to let that happen. Which brings me to my core point about election derangement syndrome. We Americans have been well trained for generations to vote for a Democrat or a Republican. There is a tremendous amount of social pressure involved with voting today. If you don't vote for one or the other, you're judged to be just plain stupid for wasting your vote. I have a handful of personal experience in being called an idiot for suggesting that people vote for whom they actually want occupying the White House. Whenever a third party candidate garners any significant attention, the entire nation goes into fight or flight mode. CNN will pound away at third party candidates by reminding you every hour that a vote for X will mean that Y loses a possible vote and the election will go to the guy that you fear the most. It is said that we have the government we deserve. Truer words are seldom spoken. If we voted for the candidate we really wanted, if fear of the other guy wasn't in the picture, we might be celebrating Bernie Sanders' second term right now. I remember the first time that I was old enough to vote. It was 1971, and Hubert Humphrey was running against Richard Nixon. I lived in Arizona and was probably stoned on something, but I was also really excited that I finally got to register. And in November, I would actually help select the next president of the United States. I registered as a Democrat, but when my voter registration came back in the mail, it said I was a Republican. I didn't pay it much mind at the time. Sometimes typographical errors get made. Maybe a secretary somewhere was tired or overworked that day. All that stuff was being done by hand back then. A short time later, I was watching the local news, and a story said that 17,000 other new voters in Arizona had the same thing happen to them. 17,000 new Democrats got registered as Republicans in Arizona that year. That's not a typographical error. That's intentional political shenanigans. Remember, this is Arizona in 1972. Elections have been suspect for quite some time. I have never fully trusted elections since. Don't get me wrong, I always vote, but I do so on the off chance that I'm wrong about how deep the electoral corruption actually goes. I believe that most votes cast in any presidential election actually go to the candidate that you voted for. I'm sure there are exceptions. Not everybody is on the up and up, but enough to change the outcome of an election? I doubt it. It's even worse now. Trump and his MAGA asshats, or maggots as I call them, have taken over the Republican Party and have successfully cast enough doubt on the whole concept of voting that no one seems to be sure of anything anymore. And that's the point. Trump put his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, in a position in the RNC. She's the vice chair now. She has been touring the talk shows recently, talking about training Republican operatives to volunteer at polling stations across the country to actually count votes and conceivably to intimidate voters in an effort to get her father-in-law elected. There has been a perfect storm of political activity that began on November 4th, 2020, at about 3 a.m. when Donald Trump stepped up to the podium and claimed that he had won the election. I can still see it in my mind. When he started, he wasn't sure of what he was going to do, and he made the decision right there at the podium while he was speaking. You can see it. Go back and look. It's yourself. It's right here on YouTube. He decided in that moment that he would try and take over the United States government. Since that moment, the MAGA Republican Party has been compiling a list of maggots that are expected to take over in January. And among the litmus tests those maggots must pass is that they have to full-throatedly profess that the 2020 election was stolen from the Trump organization. They have to be election deniers. They are being vetted and recruited right now based on their loyalty to Donald Trump rather than the Constitution. And they're not going to need competence to do anything because all they need to do is follow Donald Trump's instructions. In so doing, the MAGA Republican Party wants to turn the whole shooting match over to a known criminal who is struggling with obvious documented mental illness. The game plan is spelled out in the MAGA Republican Party manifesto called Project 2025. And please look it up, Project 2025. It's a blueprint for an authoritarian, white, nationalist, male Christian government based largely on the Bible. This is some scary stuff, my people. It's like I said, this is a whole new ballgame now. Oh, by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe. And you'll find links in the description below. And don't forget about my books. There's links down there for that too. Now, when I wrote this back in the summer of 2007, I was still pretty hopeful that we could turn this whole thing around and get back on course. We had just been through 8 years of the Cheney-Bush regime, which furthered the unitary executive theory that Republicans had been working on since Richard Nixon uttered the statement, "If the president does it, it's not illegal." That was 1977. Every Republican president since then has furthered the effort to turn the presidency into a unitary executive that would have command over all other branches of government. He or she would essentially be a monarch. This time, though, it's about to become a criminal enterprise that would turn the United States of America into a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump organization. I'm scared. I will be voting my fear in November, my very real fear that it's already too late to save our democratic republic. This insurgency that became clear on January 6th has been going on largely unnoticed since 1977. It's an insurgency that has been building slowly and methodically this whole time. And it is coming to a head this year with Donald Trump and his obviously angry, reckless, and violent maggots. Make no mistake about it. We are in the midst of a revolution right here, right now. And it all gives new meaning to my theory of election derangement syndrome. A personal hero of mine, former CBS Evening News anchor Dan Rather, used to end his broadcast with a single word that was relevant to his times. With love and hope, I am wrapping up this post with that same single word. My name is Gregory, and this is the view from out here. Courage.